Good morning. It's Suzanne Tyson from Points for School, based in Toronto, Canada. And I have with me today Liren Candine, who is with NCA Tutor and Lex PD. And Liren, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background, your legal journey. We're going to talk about getting into law school, studying internationally, and being accredited back in Canada so you can practice in Canada. So Liren, I'd love to know a little bit about your academic journey, where you studied, why you chose to do that, and where it's taken you to today.
Sure. Thank you, of course, for the invitation and for inviting me to this discussion. Happy to share my knowledge with everybody who's considering, studying law abroad. I personally did my law degree in the UK, so I studied abroad. That was quite a while back. I'm now a licensed lawyer in Ontario as well as in New York. And my journey was, growing up in Ontario. I did do my undergraduate degree in Ontario. I studied business at the University of Toronto. I worked for a bit in the technology space and worked in sales and business. And I wanted to go abroad. And I went to the UK. It seemed very interesting to me. I got into a good law school, and so I went there quite a while back when it wasn't popular to do so. Now it's quite popular. There are a lot of Canadians studying in the UK or studying in the US or Australia even. My initial plan was to move to the US, which I did do. And I qualified as a lawyer there first, and I was living and practicing in New York, simultaneously going through the licensing process in Ontario for that time if I ever wanted to head back to Ontario. So I was called to the bar in Ontario a year to the day after my call in New York. I remember that, and I think that was back in 2013 in New York, I think, and then 2014 in Ontario. So yeah, that's my story. I've kind of been around the place and I've moved to different countries. I'm in Europe now as well, so but I'm back and forth between Europe and Toronto, of course.
And tell me about your journey into entrepreneurship, because you run companies as well as your practice.
Yes. So NCA's tutor specifically started 13 years ago. 13 years ago, while I was going through the licensing process, I was studying with a group of friends who I always studied with in law school. And the way we studied was I would teach them the material. I would study myself, and then I'd kind of give it over and teach it. And so that small group ended up expanding, where their friends would come and their friends. And as we were going through the licensing process in Ontario, I was teaching a group of students who would then ask me if their friends could join. And NCA Tutor was born. And it's been going strong. We've got a number of lawyers that work for us that teach various subjects. We've worked with over 3,500 students, over the past decade now, from over 73 countries. So that includes Canadians who have gone abroad to study, but also, new immigrants to Canada, people who are, immigrating from other countries and wish to practice law in Ontario. I've always kind of had that entrepreneurship bug. So, I love teaching. I really enjoy teaching, and this is something, I'm very passionate about, and so I've stuck with it for a while.
So let's take a step back, because the NCA tutor part comes at the end of someone's international study. But let's talk about getting a law degree internationally. And for the students and parents who are tuning into this, what are the reasons you'd want to study internationally as opposed to studying at a Canadian school? What are some of the benefits? And if you want, I know you've got lots of experience in the UK. Why don't we focus on any Canadian students that maybe are in high school, grade 12, or in their undergrad, decide they want to do a law degree? Tell us about the process decision process to study in the UK and the advantages of doing that. And then we can talk a little bit about the details and then how you come back to Canada to get licensed in practice.
Sure. One of the advantages would be costs. The costs associated with studying in the UK is, I'd say, on average, still cheaper than it is studying in Canada. But you do need to factor in the cost of living. Of course, you're moving to another country and going abroad. But the UK does offer 2-year LLB programs. And so if you already have an undergraduate degree, you can study in the UK for 2 years, significantly reducing your living costs, right? You don't have to pay for dormitories for 3 years like you would if you were moving, somewhere in Canada to do your law degree where you'd have to live on campus. So those costs, in some cases, or in a lot of cases, it could be cheaper than studying in Canada. Another advantage could be if you're a high school student, as you said, and you're considering studying law abroad, but you're not sure, you don't have to wait until you've done a degree first, before you can jump right into it. So in the UK, your LLB is, in the traditional sense, an undergraduate degree, and you can apply directly out of high school, and you can study and do a 3-year LLB right out of high school. You wouldn't be allowed to do the 2-year advanced LLB because that's only available to students who already have a degree in most cases, but you can do a 3-year LLB directly from high school. And that may shave some of the time you have in deciding, is law for me or not? Should I do it? Do I have to wait until I've, completed some other degree first, and why? You can go directly from high school, which I think is a pretty neat advantage. And, for some students, they've got that travel bug. They want to see the world. Being in Europe, opens a lot of doors for travel because it is very inexpensive to travel once you're in Europe, right? You can find flights for, 15 pounds. You can fly. I remember flying to Norway on a date with somebody who's now my wife. But, she asked me one day, would you like to go see an opera? And I'm like, well, I don't really know anything about opera. I've never been to one, but she's like, yeah, let's go. I'm like, sure, why not? She's like, it's in Norway. I'm like, okay, but the trip's only 30 pound, 30-pound return. I'm like, okay, amazing. So we flew to one of the most expensive cities in Europe. It turns out that the bus trip from the airport to the city center costs 5 times the cost of the flight, but I digress. There are other cities you can visit, and you can have lots of fun visiting Europe. I've been to Italy, been to Spain, been to so many places, and I only did that because I was there. And that's amazing. It's the best time to really get out there, see the world.
Right. Yeah. And what about for those so you mentioned that you worked for a while and went back to school. This is also an option for a second educational and career path. Are there lots of mature students that go back as well? And what's the application process? Does it differ?
So the application process in getting to the universities, I don't believe it differs. Yes, there are mature students going. Just last year, 2 of my students who are friends from Toronto, they went abroad together. They're in their late 40s. They came back. I think one of them was about 49 when he came back, and he said, my goal is to be licensed by 50. And he's doing it. So that's this year. He will be licensed as soon as he finishes his articleships. And he did as a mature student, even with children. It was complicated. He did a lot of back and forth, but he did do it, and he decided to go there because he took a very fast shortcut. He did his first year online, and his second year he had to do in person for his degree to be a qualifying law degree. So he went abroad for his second year only. Yeah. So yes, there are mature students, and of course there are mature students who are immigrating to Canada as well. But yeah, there are people that go through this licensing process in different stages, but I'd say the vast majority are, students of university, typical university age students in their 20s, going abroad.
So let's talk about the licensing process. Once they've completed it, students completed their degree and they want to come back to Canada and practice. Tell us about that process. How does that work?
Sure. So the licensing process, before you even apply, maybe we should wind it back a little bit. It's important to do your research to make sure that the university you're applying to can offer a qualifying law degree. And the website you should go to visit is the National Committee on Accreditation. The National Committee on Accreditation is a standing committee of the Federation of Law Societies of Canada. The Federation of Law Societies, or the FLSC, they set the national standard for Canadian education, and foreign trained lawyers are measured against that national standard. And so, for you to have a qualifying law degree, the degree that you take, first of all, has to be a common law degree. So, from common law country, whether that's the UK, Australia, the United States, any other countries that offer common law degrees. Those degrees need to be qualifying degrees, meaning they're recognized by the licensing body in that jurisdiction. There are other requirements as well, but you should visit the website of the National Committee on Accreditation so you have an idea. There's also a quick self-guided survey that you can take, and it asks you, do you have an undergraduate degree? Which university did you study in? What grades did you receive overall? And then it can tell you if it's a qualifying law degree, and it gives you an idea of the requirements you'll have when you come back and what you'll have to do. But essentially, you cannot go directly into the lawyer licensing process until your degree is recognized in Canada.
Okay.
As a qualifying law degree. And that's the responsibility of the National Committee on Accreditation. They will look at your grades, they will look at your transcripts from your international school, and they'll determine whether, measuring it against the national standards set by the FLSC, they'll determine whether that's a qualifying law degree. There are other things to take into account as well. And then they'll provide you with an assessment. You have to pay for this assessment. The costs do change. They vary. They varied over the years from $350 all the way to $500 for an assessment. And once you are assessed, they will tell you the assignments that you need to complete in order to have your degree recognized.
Okay.
The assignments you may have to complete include going back to law school if you don't have a qualifying law degree. Okay, so they may say, sorry, your degree is not recognized. You need to go back to law school for at least 2 more years. So that's why you don't want to find yourself in that situation. You should do the homework before and ensure that, the school that you're applying to can indeed give you a qualifying law degree, and know what qualifications you have to meet. What's the minimum grade? There is a minimum grade you have to achieve overall in order to have your degree recognized in Canada. So the National Committee on Accreditation will give you a list of assignments to do on your assessment, and there are a number of ways to complete those assignments. You may complete the assignments, like most students, through self-study, and they'll have to write some exams. Okay. Another way to complete those assignments is to apply to a Canadian law school to take those assignments. Okay, so if you get into a Canadian law school, which is difficult to do, there are a number of ways to do that. You can do single course enrollment through a JD program. It's very difficult to do. In Ontario, you have to go through OSAS and apply for one single course. That's very challenging to get in for those single courses. Many Canadian law schools have now developed Master of Law programs that will help you achieve these assignments. you know, personally, I'm not a big fan of a Master of Law program that offers first-year law courses as a
Mm,
master's degree. They do charge you a premium for those programs, at least twice as much as, an ordinary LLM on average is about 10K.
mm.
Whereas a master's of common law, for some reason, is, 35 plus or something, depending on the law school. Okay, so you have to consider, the value you're getting, but you can complete all your assignments through one of those programs. Okay.
Is that the
Uh,
only way to do it, Lauren? Is that you have to go to an accredited Canadian law school to get the courses required by the accreditation body? Is that
No,
the
it's
only way to do
it's
it?
certainly not the only way to do it. Single course enrollment is available. You can also there are some universities offering online classes, and it's for a non-degree program, so you can take those courses from those universities as well. But again, the costs are substantially higher than writing the exam with the National Committee on Accreditation. Right?
Okay.
The exams with the National Committee on Accreditation may run you, again, the prices change from year to year, but around $400 or $450 per exam. Whereas a law school course may be $3,000, right?
So you can go
Uh,
right to the exam
that's
to,
right.
okay. So let's talk about that as the alternative route rather than taking, so tell us about that. And NCA Tutor helps with that, right?
NCA Tutor definitely helps with that. That's what we do. We're a prep program. We prepare students for these licensing exams. These licensing exams are intended to be self-study, but there are many reasons why people would want to go through a prep program. They want some structure, they want somebody to be accountable to, or they are working full time, or they have children, or there are many reasons why somebody would want to go through a prep course. Our courses are designed specifically, following the syllabi that the National Committee on Accreditation puts out. And they're designed, specifically to prepare you for the exams. Um, and and that's what our focus has been for over a decade now. So we offer live classes as well as on-demand classes um, several times a year. The National Committee on Accreditation has 4 exam cycles per year. What that means is that you can write the 5 core exams, which would be constitutional law, administrative law, criminal law, foundations of Canadian law, and professional responsibility. You can write those exams 4 times a year in the 4 cycles that they're offered. There are also other courses that are not part of the mandatory courses that you may be assigned, other what we call elective subjects, because in some case you can elect from a list of subjects to choose. Those ones are offered less frequently, could be twice a year or 3 times a year. And so you have to plan out your schedule, well, so that you're not left waiting 6 months just to complete your elective subject because it's not offered 4 times a year. So since the cycle is 4 times a year, we have classes that run about 3 to 4 weeks before each exam. And our schedule, of course, is modeled after the examination schedule, which you can find on the National Committee on Accreditation's website. Yeah. If you're looking for future years, typically the exam schedule doesn't change that much. So you can see the 2025 schedule, and you can expect it to be similar in 2026 and 2027. Doesn't change that much. But rules do change. The licensing rules change because the Federation may update the national standard, and there may be new requirements. So you always have to watch out to see if the national standard has changed.
Okay. So somebody completes the degree, say in the UK, and I know that you work with Birmingham University. So at what stage should students be looking at the accreditation process during their education? Should they be looking at it before they graduate? And how quickly can somebody, if they could focus on it 100% of the time, how quickly could they then become licensed to practice in Canada?
Okay, great question. So I would say that there are two main points in time when you should consider, the National Committee on Accreditation. One is before you apply to law school in some foreign country. You want to make sure that you're applying to a program that is recognized. So do your homework beforehand. And then in your final year, just a few months before you graduate, you should consider the examination schedule. And you should consider gathering your documents so that you can be assessed quickly. As soon as your law school transcripts are available, you can have your assessment done immediately so you can start your exams. You cannot write any of your exams until the National Committee on Accreditation has assessed you.
Okay.
Right? So even though you're going to have to take the 5 mandatory subjects, you still can't register and write them until you've received your official assessment from them. So you should be preparing a few months before, because not only do you have to submit your law school transcript, but you also have to submit any undergraduate degrees or transcripts that you have before law school. Those have to be sent in as well. So there's some gathering of documents that may take some time. And you want to start that before your graduation so that as soon as you have your law school transcript, it's submitted directly to the National Committee on Accreditation, and then they can start assessing you. Those assessments can take, the time range has changed, but I believe it's 6 to 8 weeks currently. And so, it could be a couple of months before you get your assessment back. And so if you can factor that in, so you take your last law school exams around June or late May, you can expect your grades to be released perhaps end of July. Maybe your transcripts won't be available until August. And then you need to count 8 weeks for assessment. And then you can think about, okay, which cycle can I sit in? Now, as for how long can you get through this process, it depends on a number of factors. Okay. The National Committee on Accreditation has stated on their website that on average it takes students 2 years to complete the this part of the accreditation process. There is another licensing process after you get your degree recognized, and we'll talk about that shortly. But to get this part of the process done, they say on average 2 years. In my experience, it doesn't take many students 2 years. Okay, most can complete it in under a year. Some can complete it within 4 months. Okay,
Oh, wow.
Or 3 months rather. And maybe those anecdotal experiences are because they're taking classes with us, and obviously they can complete more exams because they're being prepped, right? So they have no issues with writing multiple exams in the same month, and so they can knock all their exams out of the way. Your minimum number of exams, again, is the 5 core exams you'll have to write, and then there's a legal research and writing requirement that you'll have to take as well. So you have 6 assignments at a minimum, and those 6 assignments can be completed over a 3-month period if you wanted to. That would be the fastest. Okay, that would be the fastest. Typically, people spread them over 2 cycles. 2 cycles would be over 6 months, right? So that's possible as well. But you can do it in 2 years. You have up to 5 years. Your assessment is good for 5 years. You have up to 5 years to complete the assignments that they've given you. But typically, 2 years, I would say, is probably not the average for most people that work with us, at least.
Yeah. So then what are the other requirements? So there's an articling requirement. I don't know very much about that. Tell us about how articling fits in to be taken on by a firm and practice.
Sure. So as a foreign trained lawyer, you first have to go through, the Federation and have the National Committee on Accreditation assess your degree to see if it's equivalent. Once you've completed all those assignments, you'll receive what's called a certificate of qualification, which says, you've completed something that's similar to or equivalent to a Canadian law degree. Now you're at par with Canadian law students. In the sense that you are now at the same starting point as them when they finish law school, And now you have to apply for the lawyer licensing process in whichever province you wish to practice in. Okay, every province has a different lawyer licensing process. Okay, the process I'm speaking of, including the certificate of qualification from the National Committee on Accreditation, that's for all of the provinces except for Quebec. Okay, Quebec is obviously a civil jurisdiction. There's an entirely different process. You have to go through the Barreau du Québec and have information from there. So we're talking about all the common law jurisdictions. You have your certificate of qualification. You are now ready to apply for the lawyer licensing process. BC has a very different process than Ontario, which has a different process than Alberta. I'll speak about Ontario because that's where most students who are applying are coming from. But yes, there are a lot of students from Alberta and a lot of students from BC as well. You'll look up the licensing process on the respective law society's website and it'll outline it. But I'll speak about Ontario, which I'm very familiar with. So Ontario has three requirements, three major requirements. You have to complete what's called the barrister and solicitor examinations. You have to complete a period of articling or training, if you will, where you're working under the supervision of another lawyer for 10 months. And then there's a character fitness requirement as well, where you submit, a long questionnaire with any documents you may have to submit, where they assess whether you are of good character to practice law. So you have to go through those three requirements. I say the character requirement as well because it's not, just another checkbox. Some people do have some backgrounds that, it may be questionable as to whether they can practice or not. So if you do have some of those questions and you're not sure, you can actually apply to the Law Society of Ontario, at least in advance, for a character fitness assessment before you even go to law school. Okay.
Oh, okay.
So some people may have, some criminal record, maybe when they were a youth or something. I don't know. And they're not sure whether that would disqualify them. So you may apply in advance for a character fitness assessment. And I think that's good to do before you invest money in a law degree, to only find out that, they're not going to consider you of good character. Okay, so there's that requirement. There is the Ontario barrister and solicitor exams, which is two separate exams, roughly 2 weeks apart. The exams are entirely multiple choice, and you have to sit for, right now it's changed. Since COVID, the exams changed. It used to be a 7-hour exam per day. It's now 4.5 hours per day without a break. So you have 4.5 hours, and then 2 weeks later, you can attempt the solicitor exam. Those exams are offered 3 times a year. You do not have to write both the barrister and solicitor exams in the same sitting. You can write barrister exam and then wait, for the next offering several months later to write your solicitor exam. There's no order in which you complete these assignments. You can do your articling first, then you can write the exams. You can write one exam, then an article. You can do the exams while you're articling. So in any order you wish. But you have to complete all of those requirements before you get what we call getting called to the bar. And that's when you've completed everything already. You've submitted everything to the Law Society, and you get, your license to practice law, at least in Ontario. That's the process. Other jurisdictions will have prep or like actual in-class studies with examinations and stuff like that need to be completed. That's very different. Ontario doesn't have that.
Okay, well, and so if somebody found out about NCA tutor while they were studying at a UK law school, for example, would you be able to help somebody navigate all of this from the beginning throughout, or what resources would you suggest people visit at the site to find out more details about what you've just discussed? Is there a guidebook or a step-by-step?
So we have a very detailed blog that we've been, posting information, since 2015. That blog goes back maybe even earlier, 2014 and 13, I think. So we have a detailed blog post with frequently asked questions, and there's plenty of very good information there. We also have a YouTube channel where we discuss some of these questions as well, and we have short tips, that we've given students. We also on our YouTube channel, we have discussions with lawyers who've gone through the process and spoken about that process and how long it took them to complete it. So there's one under our live tab on YouTube where I speak to 3 lawyers who completed all of their exams, their equivalency exams at the National Committee on Accreditation. They completed all over a 5-day period.
5 days?
That's right. Prior to COVID, these exams were offered 4 times a year over a 1-week period. And the 3 students who I spoke with, this was just around the time, just before COVID, they wrote all of their 5 exams. Some wrote 7 because they had 7 to write in those 5 days.
Wow.
And so, yeah. So when students ask me, can I finish, basically the National Committee on Accreditation hasn't changed much since COVID. They've just taken those 5 days and spread them over 3 months. It's the same 4 exam sittings, but those 5-day period has been spread over 3 months. Okay. So people ask me, can I really complete, the cycle within 3 months? I say, well, students have done it in 5 days. So yeah, of course they prepped for it, and they, they started a few months in advance to prepare for all those exams. But it's certainly possible, on average, 3 to 4 weeks per exam is what you would, use to prepare. So plenty of information on our YouTube channel, plenty of information on our blog. Of course, there is the National Committee on Accreditation, which is the regulatory body. You want to go and see their website. They've got a frequently asked questions page. They have the most up-to-date policy, which sets out, the requirements you need to meet, and those requirements may be updated from time to time. So that's a great resource as well. We're available. You can email us. You can telephone us. Our website's ncatutor.com. It's easy to find. If you have questions about the Ontario lawyer licensing process, you can contact us at lexpd.ca. That's lexprofessionaldevelopment.ca. We also offer courses for the Ontario bar exams. We offer indices for the Ontario bar exams and private one-on-one, tutoring, both for the Ontario bar exams as well as the examinations with the National Committee on Accreditation. So
what's an indice? What are the indices? I saw those listed and I don't know what those are.
So for students who are writing the barrister and solicitor exams, you have about 2,000 pages of content that you have to read. And you normally have very little time to read them and to absorb the information. An index or indices is basically a compilation of terms and where you can find those terms in the materials. Because the exam is an open book exam, the index is very useful to look up the answers to questions. And so an index is a massive project. There are over 40,000 terms. When you print it out, it's nearly 1,000 pages, this index. But it's to help you navigate through this open book exam so that you can find the content you're looking for when you need it.
Wow.
Yes.
Very, very handy. Okay, so that sounds great. And I have just one other segment I'd like to talk about is you mentioned that there are newcomers to Canada who've studied, they bring their families or whatever their situation is in coming to Canada. Is there anything that you'd like to share with the mature learner after they find that their university is an accredited, approved university? Is there anything that's different for them or that you would advise that segment of the legal population to do to accelerate their success in becoming a practicing lawyer in Canada?
So for many of them, their degrees are recognized. Their degree would not be recognized if it weren't a qualifying degree in their own country. So they're not necessarily a lawyer in their own country, or if they did a degree that's entirely online. Those types of things are not considered qualifying law degrees because they don't meet the national standard in Canada. Canada, you cannot do an entirely online degree. Now, since COVID, that policy has changed. The national standard was changed because Canadian law schools did have to go online for a certain period of time. And so there is now flexibility in having some online portion of your learning. Okay, so the current policy as of today, we'll just go into it because some people may be in this situation, is that if your degree was done at least 1/3 in person, 1/3 entirely online, and 1/3 online interactive, then it would still be considered a qualifying law degree. And so if you're in that situation where you're not sure, online degrees are not recognized. Entirely online degrees are not recognized. Neither are degrees that are offered by, I think it's called the University of London, but they have satellite campuses in certain countries, like in Pakistan and in other places. Those satellite campuses would not be considered in-person learning for the National Committee on Accreditation.
Interesting.
So those are some things to watch out for, and you'll know this when you do the self-assessment on their website. So, but in most cases, lawyers that are coming from abroad do not have an issue with having a qualifying law degree. Okay. And so they'll be eligible for this process. The advice I would give somebody who is considering immigrating to Canada is start the process in your country, because you can write your exams with the National Committee on Accreditation from your country. They're online exams. You can write them from wherever you are. And the reason I say start it from your home country is because you get to Canada, the cost of living may be higher. You're going to have to find some temporary job to sustain yourself, or you're going to be living off your savings. And it may take you a couple of years to complete this process. Because yes, the National Committee on Accreditation process, you need to wait the assessment time, and then you have to do your examinations, and then you have to wait a few months for your certificate of qualification. All that could be a year, but then you have at least another year in the lawyer licensing process, right? And that's a couple of years that you may not be able to afford. So if you could do it while you're still back in your home country before immigrating, or at least get a head start on it and try and complete as much as you can, I think that will be beneficial, because it is possible to write these exams while you're still working. For sure, you can do it.
Yeah. Okay. And the other piece of that is that both NCA Tutor and LexPD's course fees can be covered through Points for School, which is converting loyalty points into those payments. So if you're short on cash, but you're long on Aeroplan points because you've been flying back and forth or working and flying, you can use the points to pay for your fees as well at NCA Tutor.
And I'm just going to add, because this is so important. Your friends and your family can donate their points to you as well to pay for those fees. And that makes a big difference, right? So yes, you may have a lot of points, but you may know people with even more points. So which is a great feature of Points for School.
Thank you for that extra bit. So I think that is fantastic information, Lorraine. If you had one bit of advice on a career in your field, your legal field, what would it be for people considering this path, this educational path and career path?
I think that this advice is true to perhaps other professions as well, but follow what drives you, follow your dreams. If you're going abroad because this is your parents' dream for you, and your dream is to fulfill your parents' dream, then do it. make sure you're passionate about it and you love it, because there's some hard work to do when you come back, and it helps you stay motivated if it's something you're passionate about, right? So follow your dreams. Don't let anything get in your way. You can accomplish this. I have not seen, people held back, and not be able to qualify because of some of the licensing requirements. If you want to get it done, you will find a way to get it done. I'm happy to talk about that and walk you through it and coach you through it. But, you know, anyone who wants to get licensed can get licensed, barring a few exceptional cases where you have bad character or something like that. But it's all possible. Okay. No matter your background, no matter your, learning abilities, you can do it.
Amazing. And it's never too late. I can still go back
Never
in
too
my
late.
rightful age. All right. Thank you so much, Liren Candine from
My pleasure.
NCA Tutor and Lex PD. This was the very first Points for School educational interview of a professional and an entrepreneur. And it's great that we started with the legal field. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.